Hello, and welcome to the Tavern Chat podcast. I am your host, Eric Tenkar, your bartender in the OSR, your main proprietor at the Tenkar's Tavern blog. And this is another in our series of Fireside Chats. Today, we have TheGlen. Welcome.
Shemai, me friendy.
All right, now I'd accuse you of speaking Greek, but I know it's not Greek.
It's Welsh.
All right, I was gonna guess Gaelic, but I would have been close, but not close enough.
My last name indicates that I'm Welsh, and I decided to learn it 1 year. And it's scary. It's scary difficult.
Well, that is pretty cool. I mean, I spend a good portion of my lunches at my local Irish pub, being retired and such. And except for my one bartender who's been in the neighborhood since, I don't know, they grew up with my mother, they're all Irish, and the ladies often speak Gaelic between each other. And it's interesting. I can't understand a word of it, but it certainly is interesting.
When you get to the past particle plurals, that's when it gets you'll strain your tongue.
Well, I'm sure it's still better than learning Latin, which is a true dead language at this point. But we are going to start now. If you've listened to these episodes in the past, we are going to do our 5 background questions, kind of get people a feel for who you are. And then after that, we will move on to, best I can call it is a hex crawl or sandbox. We'll go wherever the conversation takes us. So, on that note, and after having said all that, can you tell us what your first RPG experience was like? How old were you, too?
I would have been about 13. I was caught up during the Satanic Panic, and somebody said to try this new game out because you'll like it. So it was first edition Dungeons and Dragons.
So you came in with the same edition I came in on. Which is probably around 1980 in my case.
Yep, Thief Acrobat.
Oh, okay. So you came in with the Unearthed Arcana rules. Even better.
We got the Unearthed Arcana right after we started playing, and you couldn't switch over to Thief Acrobat till 5th level anyways.
All right. Yeah, I came in with AD&D, and I was a pure vanilla fighter. I didn't have a background in fantasy fiction or anything like that at that point. But one game of AD&D, and I was hooked for life, and I was getting the Lord of the Rings trilogy and all the fun stuff.
Yeah, I think my grandmother gave me a copy of The Hobbit. The only reason why I played a thief was because I was brought into a party that didn't have one.
Wasn't that always the case?
Usually with thieves and clerics, almost always.
And I was going to say the same thing. Thieves and clerics are often the classes that are forgotten. At least back then, everybody wanted to play paladin, ranger, magic user. Thief was an afterthought, and nobody wanted to be a cleric. And these days, I find cleric playing my OSR games. I like playing a cleric. It's flexible.
Clerics are so hard to get right, not just playing them, but also doing the rules as well.
They are, but if you're playing a cleric, you're a little bit of a spellcaster, and you certainly can fight up there with the fighters, especially if you're playing, I don't know, OD&D or Swords and Wizardry, where there isn't usually that much of a strength bonus being given to the fighters. So not having a strength bonus isn't going to affect you in combat that much. Turning undead, very powerful.
Yeah, and then there were some spells that sometimes would put you over the top, especially like 3rd edition.
Oh yeah. Even earlier, things like Hold Person was huge. Command, used properly, huge. So
or
yeah, you could put
cast Silence 15-foot radius on a rock and throw it at the feet of the villain.
Definitely. And I think Continual Light for a cleric was a second level spell. So if you had a cleric in your party, you were getting some good stuff going on. And Continual Light could also be used to blind. I always enjoyed playing a cleric, and I could never understand why it was usually the last class that my players would actually gravitate towards. The players survive, the party survived to, I don't know, fourth, fifth level. They were looking for a cleric henchman. They would pick a druid over a cleric. I never understood that either.
Not a lot of people like to play what they think are support classes.
Yeah, and it's strange because until MMOs, we really didn't even think of it as a support class. We thought of cleric as one of the core four, but for some reason overlooked as weak and not very powerful. And potential was there, but
well, it was also, especially like with the thief, is the party sometimes, usually didn't need more than one.
Right, that is true. You always needed more than one fighter. You need, somebody that can. And AD&D, I think, changed the balance between fighter and cleric. That clerics were, at least in combat, they weren't as close to the power of a fighter in combat, and I think that balance did change. That could have been it too. We only played AD&D. We thought basic was for kids.
I got heavy into basic because it was on sale at KB Toys.
Oh my god! Yeah, I think KB is where I got a supplement 6 with the sacrifice on the altar. And that was like behind glass, but I picked that one up. Even not buying original or any of that other stuff. And then I got basic when it was in some discount store with the side was clipped because these books were, the boxes were supposed to have been destroyed. They were remainders. So I got my basic set for like $4 when I could get it.
I just was on vacation in Corpus and walked by KB Toys, and they had all the basic Beckme modules for like $1 or $2 each. I remember I had to buy that, or I was going to buy Pyromania, Def Leppard's album, and I went for the games instead.
Understand, but yeah, Pyromania was probably high school for me, and the only reason why I was able to buy that is I bought it with a friend. We split it. One took the LP, one made a copy with the cassette. My God, those were the days, weren't they?
Yeah, you don't get 80s power metal like that anymore.
No, you don't. And Def Leppard, Iron Maiden, Survivor were these were my bands back in early and mid '80s. They defined D&D for me in a lot of ways. Well, that and Led Zeppelin, but that's a given. All right. Well, as we mentioned basic, what are your thoughts on race class?
That's a tough one because some of them, like elves, stood out on their own, but then you had the dwarves and the fighter, or the dwarves and the halflings were just basically fighters with more rules. What they really blew it out when they came out with the player or the creature crucibles, Tall Tales of the Wee Folk, Top Ballista. Then it went from 3 class races to almost 50. Then you had variety. Then you had something that you could actually play that just wasn't a toned down or an altered version of a previous class.
See, I never actually had the creature crucible. I remember seeing it on a shelf at the Complete Strategist when I was younger. Never picked it up. Something I gotta probably find on RPG Now.
Yeah, the Tall Tales was fantastic. If you like, I'm Celt. My race, my ethnic background is Welsh, so a lot of Arthurian stuff like that. And Tall Tales of the Wee Folk is just an all-time classic. Top Ballista was kind of strange, but it was all aerial creatures, and I mean, you're playing gnomes and biplanes.
Oh, okay.
Then you had the Sea People, which was all underwater, and that's kind of, if you want to do an underwater adventure, it's fine. And then the 4th one was all about playing lycanthropes, and that was almost all rules, almost no fluff.
Really?
because the rules were complicated. You split your XP between your lycanthrope class and your regular class.
Okay, that's interesting.
Then you had the racial stuff from the Orcs of Thar, which was orcs, goblins, hobgoblins, trolls, stuff like that. And that would have worked. I mean, that was a decent way to do it. It's just they wrote themselves into a corner with that background setting. Because you can play an orc or a gnoll, but they're currently at war with the humans and the demi-human races, so you're playing bad guys.
Oh, okay. Now, question on that then. This is probably coming out right around the same time 2E was, and 2E was hitting with the complete players splat books. I know the stuff in those handbooks were poorly balanced, to say the best. How were the creature crucible stuff?
It depends on each one. Some of them, like I think it was the top ballista, they didn't have ECLs, but you had negative experience points. So if you wanted to play a Sphinx, you started off at like a -1,000,000, and every so many you would add a slight more ability until you hit 0, and then you had all the abilities of the Sphinx. Some of them, like
interesting.
The pixies, the brownies, and the leprechauns, that you were playing those for fun because, well, you could punt them. I mean, they're half the size of a halfling, if that. And then you had the larger ones like the tree ants and the sea giants, and those in game those were hard to play because you're not playing a tree ant and keep on the Borderlands.
No, you're not fitting.
No, so there was some wonderful ones that were great to play. I mean, the human-sized ones weren't bad. I don't remember anybody saying there was so much unbalanced. But the more exotic ones you got, it was really hard to put into a party.
I see, because I've spoken to people that were involved with TSR back in that day, but on the AD&D side. And a lot of that stuff in those complete players handbooks, whatever they were called, was not play tested. So that's why you had things like Blade Singer, which was completely overpowered as an elven kit, and some other stuff that was just either lackluster or just not balanced. But what you're describing to me sounds like they actually put a little effort, at least maybe play testing it, maybe just checking for balance. At least I've learned in my my older years, it looks like in the later era of TSR and the 2E, which I was playing, that the more balanced or at least better written stuff was probably on the basic expert side or Beckme side, I guess at that point.
I've seen the official apology from the Complete Book of Elves. The guy that wrote it did issue an apology because he was supposed to be writing it, and they never even bothered reading it. They just put it straight out. The Beckme side was kind of run by the old guard, whereas Williams had kind of purged everything on the AD&D side. There was still a lot of the old guard left over on the D&D side. And because of that, these were the guys that, had been doing this since the beginning until she started getting rid of them. So yeah, there was a lot more experienced writers over there. That's where Mincer ended up. That's where Bruce Hurd ended up. That's
Right.
Aaron Alston. Hold on just a second. The dog's howling. He's got another squirrel.
Not a problem. I'm sure my dog will do so when my wife comes home in a few minutes. And of course, right now, Dunk is laying peacefully in the arms. But yes, I do find it interesting that the Beckme side was probably better handled than the 2E side, but I think the 2E side was probably bringing in more money.
It depended on exactly what time it was.
Oh, okay.
I reviewed all of the Mystara stuff, and I've talked to a lot of people about what was going on, and there's a lot of politics, and there was a ton of bad blood still. when they were doing the Blackmore line, when they brought Arneson in because Gary needed more people on his side, so he tried to bury the hatchet with Dave.
Right.
The Blackmore series of modules, the 3 that Dave did and the one they did without him, that was one of the best-selling set of modules in TSR history.
Really?
Everybody wanted to see what Blackmore was, but they had to shoehorn it into another setting, so they actually put it into 2. But only one had Dave working on it.
Okay. Because I do remember, I think I had that was like DA 1 through 3 or something like that, or 1 through 4.
They did. There was DA 1 through 4. They had a 5th one that they were going to come out with, but by 3, David already had too much of all the crap that was going on, so he left, and they canceled the 5th book and did the 4th book without him.
I think there was it DA 1 or 2 that has like the giant wheel battle, whatever the frick it was, on the cover?
I think that was Adventures in Blackmore, yeah.
Okay. I bought that one, quote, back in the day. I never used it. There's a lot of ones that I didn't use because the power levels just didn't match my party. That was the problem with the Bloodstone Pass stuff. I was like, there's no way my gamers are ever going to hit the point where they could play this ever.
The Blackmore series was weird in the fact that it wasn't a very high level setting, but of the 4 modules, 3 of them were pretty much guidebooks to Blackmore with an adventure stuck in between them.
Right.
Only Temple of the Frog was a straight up adventure from start to finish. Everything else was, and this is what the Blackmore world looks like. Oh, and here's an adventure we almost forgot.
Yeah. That's, pretty much, I guess, in some ways, I guess the Beckme side was neglected. I think a lot of the monies were being put into the 2E side back then. All the setting books, all the splat books. Again, in retrospect, I think I would have been better served having played on the Beckme side because it would have required a lot less collecting.
Beckme had over 100 books released for it, so they didn't shy away from the releases.
See, again, I never even realized that. I just remembered on the AD&D side, it was like a box set coming out at least every quarter. Whether it was a new setting or a new Forgotten Realms box set for Waterdeep or Undermountain or whatever. And I didn't see that same, I don't want to say marketing, that same influence, though, on the Beckme side. But I guess Rules Cyclopedia, I did pick that up, and I really did like the way they presented the Beckme rules as one book with that. So,
and the problem was, they presented it as basic, and that was simplistic.
Yep.
They started adding more and more rules, and when they got up to Companion and Master, Beckme was just as complicated as AD&D. It's just they did steps.
But when you're a teenager, something called Basic, how could you play Basic when you got Advanced?
Yeah, exactly. It was just poor marketing, and TSR really didn't, or under Williams, really didn't want to deal with the old guard. She was trying to push them out.
Yeah, and that whole reason for 2E was to get Gary and Dave's names off the core books.
Yeah.
She didn't want to be paying residuals to people that were no longer with the company. So that's why they pretty much got scratched off at that point.
And not just those two. When I talk to people, a lot of them tell me that don't ask questions about her at all.
Oh yeah, and that is fine. I do know people that worked at TSR under her, and they never want to discuss her ever.
Yeah, when I talk to Jim Ward, he still spits venom, but he's one of the few that will talk about it.
Oh, all right. I got to track down Jim one day. It'd be interesting to hear some of the stories. Everybody else just kind of like, they talk about their dealings with each other, and they'll mention, that there was always this stressful aura around the office in general, but they don't go into details about that part.
No, it's just a bad part of their life they'd like to forget.
Yeah, I guess so. All right. Well, now we've talked about different versions of D&D and such, but what is your go-to RPG at this point?
Well, I'm writing a kind of massive source book for 5th edition, but I kind of fell back into Star Wars D6.
I like the open D6 system as it wound up being once they lost their license. I think it handles different genres pretty well, and it's cinematic in a way.
Yeah, it's the you want to do what rules?
Yeah, we got the dice for that. It's a very flexible system, and unlike other systems that try to cover multiple genres, it isn't complicated with horrible math, and the rules are easy to grasp, even though they are deep.
Just the Star Wars version is just easy to get people to play it, because the other game that I've got just about everything for is Cyberpunk 2020, but everybody's waiting for the new version.
Oh, that was that R.A. Talsorian Games?
Yeah, R. Talsorian Games under Mike Pondsmith. He got a whole bunch of money from CD Projekt Red to make a video game of his Cyberpunk.
Ah, okay.
So he's coming out with, it's not technically 4th because they've completely disavowed 3. It's Cyberpunk Red.
We're gonna stop numbering. We're just gonna go on. Well, that's kind of like what Tunnels and Trolls did with Tunnels and Trolls Deluxe, being that they went from 5th edition. There was an unofficial 6th edition that Flying Buffalo didn't put out, and then they went to 7th, and then 7.5, and then said, "Screw the numbering. It's just deluxe."
Kind of like Paranoia did.
I don't even know if Paranoia ever actually numbered their editions. I had the 1st edition.
Yeah, they had first edition, 2nd edition, 4th edition, 6th edition. Then I think they went to 3rd edition.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, their numbering system was deliberately completely out of chronological order.
Yeah, I was actually lucky enough to have play tested some of the adventures for West End Games when they were in Manhattan here in New York City. I still have my Hill Sector Blues printouts from the old, not wasn't dot matrix. They had a higher end printer. It was that rectangular matrix printer, or square.
Paranoia is just a fun game because you can just sit down with no expectations.
Yeah, you can die 5 times. You still got 2 clones left.
We had at OwlCon, I was asked to run a Paranoia game, and we ran a Paranoia Call of Cthulhu crossover. We almost hit 500 deaths in 4 hours.
That is awesome.
They lost 72 characters turning off a record machine because it was skipping on the word Haster.
Oh, that's some nasty shit.
Yeah, the at one point the party was shot by the Death Star in self-defense.
Oh God. Yeah, I ran Paranoia. I never actually played it as a player, but running it was just a blast. I still my box is still full of notes from game sessions, and my players are passing back and forth to me.
Yeah, I mean it's just it's kind of a catch-all, just fun. It's like if I ever meet the Grim Reaper and get to pick my game, I'm naming Paranoia because that's going to guarantee immortality if I'm running it.
Nice. Very nice. All right. Another one of our questions then. We're going to move on to Save or Die, not the podcast, but the game mechanic. Where do you stand on it?
On what again?
Save or die.
Depending on the game, yeah. I mean, are you playing, a superhero game? Then no. If you're playing Twilight 2000, absolutely. If the game has a reputation of lethality, or if lethality is part of the mechanics, then yes, it's what you're getting into. But if you're playing a high heroic game like adventure, then no, you want them to race the clock to try to get to the antidote to the player.
Yeah, and then some of it also, I think, like you said, it depends on the game. It even depends on the edition of the game. If you're playing, I don't know, a clone of one of the earlier editions of D&D, and you can recreate your character in 10, 15 minutes and get running again, that's one thing. If you're playing Pathfinder and you just lost your 6th level character and you're going to be sitting at the table for the next 2 hours re-rolling and rebuilding, I think Save or Die has got a much harsher impact.
And God help you if you're playing GURPS or Champions.
Oh God, and just as a comment, they're both D6 games, but Champions is buckets of D6s and GURPS is buckets of points trying to build your character, and advantages and disadvantages.
If you're playing GURPS Supers, it's the buckets. I won't lie.
Oh, it turns into buckets at that point. Okay,
yeah.
Well,
that's my guilty pleasure is GURPS Supers. I haven't played it in years, but I liked it better than Champion Supers.
so I never played GURPS Supers. We did do Champions, but that was the first edition of Champions, little box set, and we did a lot of characters and we did some trial combats. I don't think we ever got a campaign going with it.
I mean, GURPS, the more books you add, the more of a math degree you'll need. I think we had to get one of the guys that actually works as a NASA scientist down here to help us with GURPS vehicles.
Oh boy, which in a way tells you how realistic the rules are if they go that deep. But there's a point where realism and gameism, have to find a balance.
Yeah. What was it? Traveler's spaceship construction rules. Nobody's ever been able to build a starship because no one, unless Stephen Hawking decided to play one day.
If we're talking the original Traveler rules where your computer was probably the size of a house.
No, I think this was New Era where they came out with, you were dealing with like 3-dimensional vectors in your space combat.
You see, I had New Era. I read it for the setting stuff, never read it for the rules. And I ran a lot of first edition Traveler, and yeah, space combat was kind of not very thrilling when it was all pretty much one-dimensional.
I started Traveler in first edition, but Mega Traveler came out, I think, a few months after we started, so we switched to mostly Mega Traveler. And it was kind of an upgrade in parts. It really wasn't different enough to really show it, what was the difference between 1 and 2. Not as different as the different versions of Twilight 2000, which they really needed to update it from 1.0 and 2.0 to 2.2.
Only played 1.0. Didn't own it. One of my friends did, and I just remember that we ran out of ammunition and fuel, and then we decided not to come back and play anymore.
2.0 had balance issues just because everybody was, I think, 60 years old when we all started in the game, because the older you got, the more skills you had.
Yeah, well, that was the whole thing with first edition Traveler too. Was how can you push your character further and further along in these 4-year chunks of career to get all these skills because you weren't going to pick up any others once you started.
That was a problem with GDW games.
Yeah. And I remember trying to house rule it back in the day, and I couldn't get a good house rule to find a way to add in skills later. With early Traveler, your point was to accumulate wealth, I guess, and influence, but it didn't spell that out in the rules. And if you came from games like Dungeons and Dragons or anything that had leveling, a game that you didn't really earn anything except for more credits or maybe a larger ship was such strange way to flip your mind to get into the right mindset.
GDW really needed an editor or a better one.
Yeah, I thought Mark Miller was the god of science fiction gaming. I just
Never edit your own work.
well, there are Traveler 5 is out there now as a new Kickstarter, or Traveler 5.1, I guess.
Haven't seen it. I've seen, what was it? The new, the ones that I was looking at was the new Top Secret, and I found a new copy of the new Twilight 2000, which, Twilight 2000, it's like late 1990s war, and this, what happens when it's, 19 years past 2000.
Right. Well, the new Top Secret is pretty decent. I play tested that in the last couple of North Texas RPG cons before it was released with Rasmussen running it.
I talked to him about
works.
I talked to him about his D&D modules, and he really didn't want to talk about that.
Well, right now, Merle is working on Top Secret, and he does some planetarium science fiction releases for Frog God Games, and that seems to be where his excitement is.
He was kind of a victim of, in at least TSR, he released 2 D&D modules that I reviewed, and what his version of them was and what got released after the editors got their hands on it was 2 different things.
Well, that wasn't unheard of back then either.
No, and he released a article about exactly how they just gutted his adventure out and took out anything that was exciting because they wanted just maps with words on it.
Jesus. Yeah, and sadly, we aren't making this stuff up. This is really how a lot of this stuff went down back in the day.
Yeah, if you Google Merle Rasmussen and Quagmire, there's a website that gives his original idea of basically playing a giant escort mission from a dying city to just a map with 3 cities and almost no description at all on it.
I mean, of course, we're stuck here, 20, 30 years later going, why the hell would they do shit like that? Why?
And they later retconned the module out of existence.
Oh, well, that tells you how much faith they have had in their own reworking of it, if you have to make it go away permanently.
And there was actually a lot of surprises when I was doing reviews. Like, I did like the bottom 10 of the Mystara series, and the worst one was written by Ed Greenwood. Because
really?
He writes great background, but he can't write a module to save his life.
Well, you know what? That was Forgotten Realms is basically built with the idea of being a fiction world, a place for him to write his fiction for. So I guess writing fiction and writing adventures is 2 different things.
Yeah, he made TSR a lot of money with Forgotten Realms, and they said, "Hey, write a module. Here's the Endless Stare." That was the name of it, and about 32-page module, standard size, and he devotes 6 of it to the inn, where you go in, you get your adventure, and you leave. But he details everything, and then he forgets to add monsters. This is a high-level adventure. I mean, it is companion level, and
right.
One of them he had as one of the monsters a Sturge.
Singular Sturge.
Uno Sturgio, as they say in France.
All right. I guess the hope is that one of your fellow PCs will lop your head off as they try to remove the Sturge from your throat.
When the wizard rolls his sleeves up and say, "I'll handle this," Marquis of Queensberry style.
Yes.
It was just it's like he wrote what would have been a good story, but forgot to add monsters. And oh my god, the exposition.
Oh, jeez. See, that's not good either. Yeah, I've seen Ed Greenwood at a convention once, and I didn't speak to him. He was walking through the crowd with a handler, but the guy looks like Elminster. He's hard to miss.
Yeah, and with 5th edition, there's a lot of bad blood, especially among the grognards towards Forgotten Realms right now. And it's just, good. Everybody loves Forgotten Realms, or TSR. Well, and now Wizards has fallen in love with Forgotten Realms, but there's so much else to talk about. All the other settings.
Well, Greyhawk is definitely loved by many, and Planescape could probably be brought out of retirement and do very well as a 5e quasi fantasy setting.
According to the new book, and according to the guy that they leaked it to, so this is official. The next book is all Greyhawk.
Really?
It's set in Keoland. They're basically, they took the Saltmarsh trilogy, added the 4 adventures from Dungeon into it to pad it to 7 adventures, and it's about the loyalists of Keoland versus the Scarlet Brotherhood. You can't put that in the Forgotten Realms.
No, the Scarlet Brotherhood, certainly not. Damn. All right. I might have to pick that up just out of morbid curiosity.
Yeah, because there's a guy that calls himself Greyhawk Grognard, who apparently has a 5th edition Greyhawk book already written, just waiting for permission to publish.
Oh, Joe Block.
I only know him by reputation.
No, I know Joe. I've shared drinks with Joe at the last TotalCon earlier this year. Joe was waiting for DM's Guild to open up for Greyhawk.
Well, according to DM's Guild rules, when they release a book that is set in a specific setting, the DM's Guild opens up. Now, that's only been Ravenloft so far, but Ravenloft was an adventure book, not a setting book, and they opened up the guild as soon as it was released.
Interesting. Because Joe really does know his Greyhawk lore, so that would be very exciting to see.
Might want to. He probably already knows, but you might want to tell him.
I'll have to reach out to Joe. Then he'll remind me that I haven't sat him down for a fireside yet.
Because I'm a Mystara man myself, but Mystara players view Greyhawk players as like first cousins, especially with the settings that don't get any love, despite having a massive release.
Oh yeah, and Greyhawk was always great because it was, especially at least initially, a lightly detailed setting. So everybody's World of Greyhawk was different. You got to fill in a lot of the blanks that weren't there. Forgotten Realms is so detailed that it's hard to run something true to the setting if your players know the setting better than you. And that isn't the same with Greyhawk.
The last time I played a Forgotten Realms campaign, the party got to watch Dritz choke on a chicken bone in the first prologue.
Well, that would be worth it.
Yeah, and then they found later Elminster died in a compromising position, and then we had fun.
Well, because you have to take out the DMPCs that are built into the setting.
Yeah, and that was I'm not a fan of Drow, and like I said, I'm not a big fan of DMPCs. If they're going to be in there, you have them in the background. Quest givers and stuff like that.
Right.
You don't send them on escort missions with the party. Like, what was it? The Waterdeep trilogy set of modules where you're escorting the soon-to-be gods, and there's nothing you can do to, like tie Cyric to a tree and take his place.
those are the adventures when we were transitioning from first edition to second edition, and they reminded me of the Dragonlance adventures, in which your party's actions really didn't make a difference because the story was going to continue no matter what they did. They had no impact.
Yeah, and then later on, TSR got into their nuke phase and decided to destroy or to drop a bomb on all the current settings, which went over as well as you could expect with all the people that played it.
Well, and part of that, 2E, and I was the first one to joke about the number of splat books that 2E had, but the number of settings that 2E had was also part of the issue because they were just it you could only play so much, and if you have I couldn't even between what was it, Ravenloft, Birthright, Planescape,
There
Dark
were nine.
Sun.
There were
9. I checked.
Yeah, I did a video on which one you should play because there's Eberron, but that was third edition.
Right.
But they cycled them in and out. They weren't all released at the same time. And Planescape came and died. Wasn't a very good rule set. Lots of nostalgia, but not very good rules.
The rules weren't great, but the setting potential was huge if it was done properly.
Right. I think it lasted just over a year. Greyhawk was kept going, but they kind of petered out the rules release because they wanted Gygax gone. Forgotten Realms was there the entire time. They brought Ravenloft up, but then they subcontracted Ravenloft. I think that White Wolf picked it up, and they were doing it.
Oh, for third edition, yeah.
Yeah, and Domain of Dread, fantastic book. Love it. Mystara kept going to 94, but it was a shell of itself after, I think, 91. Birthright was brought in late when TSR was in its death spiral. Planescape was brought in, wonderful setting. The video game, solidified that into D&D history. And then Dark Sun came along, but it was only for a few years because I guess of poor sales.
Well, it didn't help that they experimented with that weird flipbook format that I don't know anybody who liked it. That was early on. They went away from that, but it was just hard to navigate as a GM.
Yeah, and so you had 9 settings, but they weren't all at the same time. I think the most they had at any given time was there was 5 toward the end, but Greyhawk and Mystara were on life support.
My feeling even back then was with the large number of settings that they had out there, if you were a completist, you needed a lot of money. And believe me, I didn't have a lot of I was not making the money to be a completist back then. So you had to pick and choose what you could actually follow and buy. And like with Birthright, I bought the box set, and then I quickly realized this is not the D&D campaign for me and my group.
One problem they had is all 10 settings focus on a different aspect of the game, and they didn't market it as such. If they had marketed Birthright as this is the high level, kings and queens, and this is what you're going to be dealing with, then you'll know if that's what you like, that's what you want to go into. If you wanted the kitchen sink, you got Forgotten Realms. If you wanted to be you're going to be exploring the world because it's mostly unknown, then you get into Mystara. If you want to play Game of Thrones low level, that would be Greyhawk. That's the best equivalent I can think of for it right now. Not the current season though. Oh my God, no.
You have the same problem I have with the current season. All right.
I'm not saying it's rushed. I'm just saying Speedy Gonzalez is having problems keeping up with the plot.
It's rushed and it feels forced. And I really that I feel there are scenes that are missing that would have at least explained or better put into context situations that are happening. You're kind of like, huh?
I've seen a cartoon where they had 10 episodes written out, and then they leave the window open and 4 of them blow away, which would explain a lot.
Well, that's like Mel Brooks' History of the World. I present you with these 15, and then one tablet falls. 10 commandments.
Yeah, I've heard that comparison too. Yes, very accurate.
It's like, oops.
Hey, you're like missing like a lot, aren't you?
It's like, here, I can liken it to, and this is going to really show my age, back with the DC explosion when comic books went from 35 cents to 50 cents. And that lasted, I think, 2 or 3 months, and then they realized it wasn't working for them. So they cut them back to 40 cents, but they had all these stories now they had to cut out 5, 6, 7 pages to bring it down to 17 or 18 pages, which was the normal number before they went to 50 cents and 25 pages. And except for the comics that use those 8 extra pages for like these little mini storylines, the ones that were using the full 25 pages, you were reading comic books. I remember as a kid going, this makes no sense, because they were taking whole pages out of the story.
Yeah,
That's what Game of Thrones is this year.
yeah.
Sadly.
It's missing massive amounts of plot or character development and plot points.
Yeah. And I feel like the story that we've been leading up to for the last 7 seasons is not necessarily the story that we're getting now. There's a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of plot points missing. A lot of we're getting from points A through D, and somehow we're stepping on B briefly and never going to C. You know, it doesn't. It's just. It's disturbing.
And just speaking as somebody who works heavily with theater, they're taking a lot of cost cutting measures, which I find peculiar, given that they're supposed to have more money than previous seasons. Shooting an entire battle scene in the dark, that's a cost cutting measure. That hides that you only got 40 guys. Because the last time I saw a movie like that pulled that shtick was the 13th Warrior.
Oh shoot! Yeah, you got a point there. And the excuse of, well, you should be watching this. It's a theater experience. You should be watching this on a large screen TV in a darkened room. I talk to people, and they're like, well, I played it back. I had to like change all my settings on my TV to view it. I'm like, that's wrong.
A 40-foot black screen it shows you about as much as a 20-inch black screen.
Yeah, depending on where you're sitting. It's like the excuses for that episode are sad. And I still want to know, a spoiler alert for anybody who's listening, you might want to just take your headphones off, but the death that the side of good suffered, our allies suffered in episode 4, and yet here we go, or episode, yeah, it was episode 4? Episode
4, which one?
Which was the battle we just talked about? Episode 4, right?
The battle was 3.
3, episode 3. All right. Huge losses suffered by the forces of good. Huge. The Dothraki looked to be obliterated.
Yeah. What did they say? They took 50 in the follow-up episode. They said they took 50% casualties of the Dothraki. So I'm assuming some of them ran off on foot, and the Unsullied took 50% casualties.
But it's funny because at the end of a huge Dothraki battle, what do we see come back? Like one horse, right? So, I mean, and yet here we go in the most recent episode, and I'm like, where the hell did all these Dothraki come from? If this is half of what they started with, yeah, I don't know. There's just some consistency,
continuity error
ideas. Yeah, but what's continuity amongst friends, right?
My favorite joke about that one was when the ships started shooting at when the ships first shot down the dragon, and in the next episode they're shooting down the dragon, and it's like everybody's missing, and the Eurons start screaming. It's like, what? Who was the guy that shot the dragon last time? That was Carl. Well, where's Carl?
Like,
it's his day off.
Where's the guy who rolled that natural 20 apparently that you needed? Yeah. Where the hell is he?
Where's the gunner from last week? Oh, that's Carl. It's his day off. He asked for it. He's got his kids from the divorce.
And again, that's the other thing. It's like, all right, you came head on and lost the dragon last time, 1 out of 2. What do you do this time? I'm gonna go head on. Why?
Or it's like
You
the
know,
World War I. We've charged across the trench 3 times and got massacred. They'll never expect us to do it a 4th time.
yeah, it's just like it's bad when I go to physical therapy twice a week, and I'm at physical therapy, and everybody that works there is like, the moment I walked through the door, did you see Game of Thrones on Sunday? Oh my God, are you disappointed too? It's like, wow, okay,
Yeah,
it's
it's
gonna be
lazy writing. It's very
yeah,
lazy writing. They want this season over with. Though I will give props to Lena Headey. She got paid $1 million an episode to sit at a window and drink wine.
yep, and she did it well. It's like
Probably real. It was probably real wine, and she was probably drinking a lot of it to try to forget that she was in this season.
yeah, I'm expecting that the last episode will be the deaths of many, just to clear the plate. And then I'm hearing, I was I was listening online to a YouTube channel who was saying that there's going to be a follow-up episode after episode 6, but it's not necessarily going to be taking place immediately after. I don't know if this is going to be a follow-up episode. It's also going to be a teaser to next year's Game of Thrones throwback episode. I don't know.
There's a prequel coming out that's set 5,000 years in the past, but every interview I've seen with people that have left the show, all of them have blasted the writing this year.
Wow. And that's a shame because they set so much up.
Yeah, there's a interview, if you look for it, it's not hard to find, of Kit Harington dodging the question for 2 minutes. Are you happy with the way this season has gone?
Oh, you have to dodge that question. How can you accurately answer that question if the answer is no? If the answer was yes, he would have said it.
If you can dodge a ball, you can dodge a question.
There you go. Wow. All right. Well, you know what? We've been here for a bit now. Before we wrap this up, I still have one question I haven't even asked you. What would the teenage you, the one that came in with AD&D First Edition, what would they think if they could see what you were doing in a hobby now? What you've been accomplished? The fact that one of our geek sites pretty much lifted your work. What would they think? The old you.
Oh, I would be rubbing it in my father's face, who never thought I would be a decent writer.
Oh.
I told him I wanted to be a writer. He said, "Why couldn't you just be gay?"
Oy.
Even when I got my first work published, he asked me if I had gotten it out of my system. But I was always good at writing, and now I look back at everything I've done and all the accolades and the things that I'm famous for, and yeah, it's like I'd say you made the right career choice, kid.
That's a good thing, man. And that's it's strange when you look back and you say, "Well, as an early teen coming into the hobby, did you expect any kind of success?" I mean, I thought if you wanted to be successful in gaming, you had to move out to Lake Geneva. That was my goal at 18, was to somehow win a scratch-off lottery ticket big enough to move out to Lake Geneva and somehow get a job at TSR.
I mean, I don't have any real, as far as writing games, I haven't had much success because the stuff I've written for didn't take off, or people have, kind of swindled me on my money, or completely edited my work to the point it was, trash, especially in the 3.0 rush. But the stuff I did on the periphery, the Mr. Welch list, things like that, that when John Kovalik, sends me a message saying this is some of the funniest stuff I've ever read, that's a high honor.
That's huge.
Yeah. And all I did was write down, things originally what, my dungeon master told me to stop doing because I was trying to game the system or just be silly. And then it exploded. And then I started writing other stuff, and people started paying me, and people still owe me money. I mean, I wrote this one game for a guy, and we had it ready to go, and I never got paid because he stopped breathing.
Ooh.
Yeah. I kept calling him, and it's like, hey, where's my money? No, he wasn't answering me. I thought he was ducking me. Then the artist calls and goes, hey, I finally got his money. Have you heard from him? Like, if I owe you money, if you owe me money and you're not answering your call, that's to be expected. But if I owe you money and you're not answering my call, that's suspicious.
Yeah.
And he was dead, and we didn't know.
Wow.
So the game died, and then I wrote another one for, I think it was Red Dragon Press, that they edited just about everything out in the game. It was awful after that. And I wrote some stuff for ACP. I wrote a lot of stuff for Reaper when I worked for them.
Oh, I didn't know that. Cool.
Yeah. I wrote, it's one of the books I'm just finishing up now, the Mystara Player's Handbook. Some of the artists used was people I met with Reaper.
It's all about making connections, man. That's what I've been doing over the last 10 years.
Yeah. When I was dating the editor from Steve Jackson in my Austin years, and that was basically what they told me was, it's like, you got to get in there. Actually, I did write a game that sold very well, which was Con the Card Game. Sold, I don't know, thousands of copies, and got screwed over by the Kickstarter. But yeah, and it's, it's getting it out. It's networking. That game sold out every time I took it to a convention. I got swindled out of money by a business partner, so I never could finish it. But I had celebrities buying the game and playing them. The guy that came up with Repo the Genetic Opera played a game, bought a game, and I didn't even know who he was.
Damn.
Yeah, and then the game got banned from people playing it on the floor at A-Kon because it was just in the way. And it's a glorious game. I'd love to reprint it for Kickstarter. I just got to get my artist to. Artists are like tires. You have to keep them inflated properly to keep them working right.
Yeah, pretty much. And for the most part, even the if you're not the tier 1 artist, but I feel like you're tier 1A, you're probably not doing this full time.
No. That was actually funny. There's a convention in New York. In order to be invited or to get on there, you have to be a published artist for an independent game. You can't be self-published.
Okay.
And Misha, my artist, I'll see if I can throw up some of her art. I paid her. She, she did the job. She's a great artist. She keeps a deadline. Oh my God. And we were right next to this one guy that was, his art was amazing. It was fantastic. And we were wondering why he wasn't famous in games. And somebody pointed out because he was an asshole. So she was talking about how she would love to go to the New York one because it was only open to people that had been, published in games. And I had to point out to her, you're published in a game. You're eligible to go. But this guy, because he can't keep a deadline and, it's all about him, he can't go.
Wow. That's poetic.
I go through, that's some of her work right there.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah. And like I said, she's really good. And she's for hire because her contract with me expired not too long ago. She got my last pieces to me.
Nice. Very cool. So, Glenn, do you have any, besides your 2,500 things Mr. Welch can no longer do during an RPG, which I've already linked in the chat and I will link in the podcast notes for this episode, do you have any other links that you would like me to drop into the notes of the podcast?
Oh, absolutely. That's some more art. That was the one that she was worried about being in the book. Not because she's naked, because I definitely have a problem with prudes, but because the tattoos are wrong.
I would never have known.
Neither would have I, but there are people that notice the fact that it's the wrong tattoos. I have written, and I'm finishing it up now, and I'll if I see you at the convention next month, a 224-page full-color Mystara Player's Handbook that I'm waiting for, that I'm trying to get Wizards to let me publish.
Oh, nice. That will be a blast. And that's definitely something when you get the AOK, ping me so I can mention it on the blog side at the very least.
Oh, it'll go live day one. I'm trying to, the file size is too big. All the art is custom. This is art from it. That's the Dwarven Cleric of Kagiar that I just posted up. And then the naked chick is a Makai Toa, or a Toa Makai, rather. All new spells, new races, I think 32 archetypes, or 32 new subclasses.
Very cool. That's something to look forward to. And after that, what do you expect to be next on your plate?
I'm working on either an expanded Fae book, because I grew up on the Time Life Fairies book from 1984, or a genocide book using the para and quasi-elemental planes. If the Mystara stuff takes off, I'll be putting out updated stuff for that, because nobody's touched that since 96, and there's a lot of people that still like it, especially in Italy.
Oh, yeah. It was popular here, too. I know a lot of people that are old school gamers that really like the Mystara stuff, but they grew up on BX and Beckme more than I would have expected. But then again, I was an elitist first edition player, so.
The thing with Mystara was the exploration setting, and it's, you said about Forgotten Realms, is everything's been explored, everything's been done for you.
Mm-hmm.
Mystara, it was all, except with very few nations were completely explored, so there was always places you could go to carve out your kingdom or your domain. Yeah, that's some more art. That's Rick Hershey and Giannis Rubus Rubilius. And Rubus, if anybody's looking for really, really good art, he is cheap, because apparently the cost of living in Greece is next to nothing. So you can pay him about $500 for really good art.
Nice. All right. I might have to when I get other stuff in order, I might have to reach out to you on that. Cool.
I really went old school with the book. I brought back Morgan Ironwolf. I've always loved her.
Okay, why is that name familiar?
Hold on just a second now.
Sounds very familiar, and I'm trying to pick it out of my head, and of course I can't. Oh, yes, definitely. That's why.
Yeah, she's probably the first iconic D&D character ever.
That's Jeff D artwork.
Yes, it is, with the 80s hair.
Yep.
We actually we said we had to update the hair. That's why in like the image with her fighting all the undead, it's a different hairstyle.
Right.
The actual real answer is artists have a really hard time drawing 80s hair.
I'm sure they've progressed beyond that. Well, very, very cool. This is stuff to look forward to. As somebody who didn't touch much on Mystara until it hit the 2E settings, there's a lot there that I'm looking forward to learning about, and I'd love to see your take on this.
That's the cover art there.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. And yeah, that looks like Blix from Legend, but that was because TSR stole so much from the movies.
Oh yeah, nobody was paying close attention back then. You didn't have the internet. You couldn't just do a Google image search and find out. Oh, geez, this looks so much like. You were doing that.
Yeah, so I am available for children's parties, and also I'm a hack mercenary writer.
Oh, that works.
Yeah, I was trying to do a book about the list, but everybody knows it. Plus, that was 10 years ago. I need to come up with new material.
Another 2,500 lines.
Yeah, if I could just play as much as I could back in those days.
Yeah, none of us can. Don't feel bad. That adjusting to that fact is part of realizing there'll never be enough time for me to game as much as I'd like to, because as you get older, real life becomes real.
Well, that's when you retire and play with the grandkids.
Well, in my case, I'm retired. I'm waiting to play with my 8-year-old niece. So we'll get there. We'll get there. All right, Glenn. Well, thank you very much, man. Really appreciate you spending the time.
Oh, anytime. Let me throw up the. Let me find the preview for my book real quick, because I've got a Welcome to Mystara is my YouTube channel.
Okay.
That's I talk about just the setting, but I've been previewing the book, and I'm having I can't sell the book. That's illegal and no, but I am printing myself a hardcover glossy for myself.
The wonders of Lulu.
Actually going to there's a local book binder that was like $5.
Even better.
Yeah, hand stitched 224 page glossy, costing half a car payment.
I believe it. But it's going to be unique, and it's going to be yours, man. Well,
And hopefully, if they'll let me, it'll be everybody else's as well.
I'll cross my fingers for you. Well, again, thank you. When we get the links from you, I'll put them into the show notes. This probably won't go up for another couple of days. I've a little backlogged on getting up the interviews. They've been.
Oh, that's fine. The size of the file is massive for some reason.
Okay. Well, Glenn, thank you. As always, folks, be safe. God bless. Roll your dice. Roll them well. And I will talk with you all tomorrow. Night, Glenn.
Party on, Eric.